Okay, now that Mario's here, we can get started.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm co-founder Nadine Saeed, and with me I have Rowan, co-founder as well.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this Saturday.
Today's event is the Social Anxiety Awareness event. Before we get started, we want to thank our guest speakers, board members, and committee members for all their hard work and making this event successful and possible.
Yeah, and just to reiterate our mission statement for those of you who may not know, we are the Art Spread, and we lead artists with adversity to success, and we spread empathy through art. Part of how we do that is through these art and adversity awareness workshops, where we build a supportive community for everyone experiencing mental, physical, or societal challenges. And a couple of announcements that we have for you. Our exhibition is coming up. It's called Impact. It's happening November 12th, which is a Saturday at 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. in Newport Beach at Gong Gallery. So we really hope that if you're local, you can all be there to support our artists. And we have new artwork in the shop. So there's a ton of new pieces. If you love resin, definitely go check it out. Nadine has linked our shop page in the chat for your convenience. It's theartspread.org/shop. And also be sure to follow us on Instagram. That's where you'll see a lot of our updates, which is also linked in the chat right now. It's the.art.spread. And subscribe if you haven't already so that you can stay up to date on all of our events and learn new art techniques.
Thanks, Ron. So you're all attending our social awareness, anxiety awareness event. And the reason why we're doing this event is several reasons. So number one, most, if not all of you, are either transitioning from having gone to school at home for the last 2 years, now back to school in person. If you're a parent, perhaps you have a child who has stayed with you the last 2 years and is now going back. Or for those of us who work, perhaps we worked from home and now we're transitioning back into the workplace. And even something as simple as the gym, for almost 2 years or a year, we were working out inside of our home and now we're back to being around people. That can be overwhelming. So what this event is designed to hopefully do for you all is how can we make that transition easier using art? There's also additional concerns like variants of COVID and monkeypox. So we just want to take the time, slow it down, and teach you how art can help with getting back with the right mindset and having a good transition back to how life was pre-pandemic.
Thank you, Nadine. So we'll get to the art part. We'll begin with that. So if you haven't already, you can download our template from our website for free. You can upload it to your iPad if you want to do it that way, or print it out. Or this one is simple enough that you can also draw it out yourself in your own variation. So the template consists of 4 curvy lines inside of a rectangular border. And it's designed to be simple so that you have a starting point, but also a lot of freedom to explore as you wish all around the page. And we chose a doodle for this workshop, which was inspired by a situation that Nadine was actually in her professional field. So I'll let Nadine explain what happened and why we're using doodles for our social anxiety awareness.
Thanks, Ron. So about 2 weeks ago, for those of you who don't know, I am an attorney as well. And 2 weeks ago, I was defending one of my clients, a very contentious case I have with a very contentious attorney on the other side. And as I was objecting to a question, he got really frustrated and started to cuss me out on the record and call me every name. And rather than looking unprofessional in front of my client and getting a rise out of me, I just took the legal pad of paper, the pen I had in my hand, and started to doodle and draw. And all that energy of that negative energy I was receiving from him, I just put on the paper, and my client was extremely impressed with how I really was non-responsive to childish remarks. And when he was done ranting, I just simply looked up and said, "Are you done?" And that caused him to get even more upset. So I felt a lot better using art in that instance.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry that that even had to happen to you, but especially for someone who, Nadine does not call herself an artist, yet she was still able to connect with art and do something right on the spot that could help. She's in this situation that she can't avoid. She's at work. All she has is a pen and paper, and yet she's still be able to doodle and help calm her nerves and allow her to represent her client well, and even in the middle of such a stressful situation. So we imagine that these things can happen at any moment, whether you're at school, at work, a doctor appointment, whatever it is. You may not have access to things you have at home, like your art supplies or other things that help you cope with stress, but you usually will always have access to pen and paper, or can ask for access to pen and paper. So that's why we really wanted to do this doodle, because we do understand that we're going back into public spaces. So how can we do something that'll help us with that in a way that's discreet and available to us? So another reason that doodles are great too is because maybe you want to keep your uneasiness private. You want to keep those feelings to yourself and not express your anxiety publicly. Doodling really helps with that, because when you have a nervous tic, sometimes that manifests physically through like snapping a rubber band on your wrist or tapping your foot. But if you're doodling, it allows you to focus on something else outside of yourself. And a lot of people don't usually question why you're doodling. It's a quiet activity. It's usually pretty private, so you're not really distracting anyone around you. And excuse me. It also is really great because your hands are one of the closest receptors to your brain. So when you're able to doodle and make something with your hands and use that, you're taking what's in your mind and you're able to express it out of you, so that it's not causing all this tension built up inside of you. So, and other reasons why doodling is so great is because there's not really a particular outcome you have to have. This isn't meant to be a masterpiece. This is just a chance for you to express yourself, release tension, or ground yourself when you're feeling anxious and in a situation that you can't get away from. So we'll go over a couple of techniques that I can show you where to begin. But if any of you have done the morning pages by Julia Cameron, it's similar to that, where there's no right way to doodle. So you can do as you wish, but I will give you some starting points so that it's not overwhelming for you. So first, we'll start with some different styles. And if everyone can switch to my screen titled my name, Rowan Ita Diaz, or pin it, or just focus there, you can see more of the templates there. So this is more of an organic shape. And this is all from the same template. This is all from the template that we have online. So these shapes are organic. We've got some curves and circles. And then this one here is more rigid. This is more geometric. I'd love to know in the chat, let me know if you like the geometric or the more organic style. But we will be focusing on the organic. So Nadine says geometric. So we will be focusing on this one. Marina says geometric. Alex, organic. Okay, so a nice mix. Mostly geometric, I'm seeing.
Yeah, Nathan too.
Thank you guys. So we will be focusing on the organic, and I do recommend using 2 pieces of paper, because if you have a heavy bleeding pen, it may seep through onto your surface. So that's just a note, because I've done that too many times, and yeah. So we'll start with just very basic shapes. Again, this is not anything special. So you see all these curves here. I'm going to show you how I just started that from these 4 lines. So I'm going to make a large curve, and then usually I'm connecting it to another one that's larger, and then another one that's larger. And this can be really messy. I have a shaky hand, so it's not supposed to be perfect. And then what I do in between is I just go back and forth so that there's more lines in between. The more lines, the more intricate and the more depth we can add. So that's that. And then when it curves the other way, so it's going underneath here, I'll do the same here. So add a curve, add a curve. It's kind of just like a relaxing, simple process. And then in between, I'll add some more lines. We can get messy here. It's totally okay. And my pen is a Bravo Pilot fluid ink marker pen. So it's really good if you have chronic pain or nerve pain. It allows you to draw with light pressure, so you're not having to push down so much. So yeah, that's pretty helpful. So we've got some shapes happening. The next thing we can do is talk about the different ways we can fill it in. So there's a couple of ways. One is Poche. So I'll show you that here. So with Poche, you will fill in the line as if to almost bolden it. So you see how this is solid now? It's a solid pochette line. I'll do another one here. It's also solid. And you can see here where it's finished. This is more of the poche style. My favorite style is the feathering. So with the feathering, you add more depth to the edges. So we'll go darker on the edges and then lighten up towards the center.
This is Helen Ita.
Hi. Thanks for joining.
I always do.
So yeah, so we'll go darker on the edges and then lighter in the center. And then what I also like to do is just add some more random lines here. And again, this is just one style, one technique. There's tons, but you see that this adds more of an undulating effect. It almost looks like hair. I don't know if you're seeing that. And then a couple of other things we can do too to add more interest is dotting. So we can do closed and open dotting, and we can also do something that's more uniform or something that's gradual. So with something more uniform, we can do open dotting that are going to be mostly the same size. And then we can do closed dotting that'll also be the same size. So you see how that's uniform. And then we can do something that's gradual, which is also my favorite. So I'm going to start with larger open dots and then make them smaller and then go into the closed dotting. And then that just also adds some depth there as well. It adds more movement. And you can see that happening here too. So let me know also if you like the poche effect, if you like the feathering. Are you into the open dots, uniform, gradual? What's your style when you're doodling? And what are you preferring with these techniques? And if you've already begun your doodles, definitely show us in the on camera. We'd love to see that. So, Marina says, love the feathering. Yes, so do I. I think that's my favorite as well.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. I know some people, Mateo, I know you've got a doodle ready. Would you like to show us on screen? Oh, okay, he's handing it to me. Okay, wow, this is...
Wow.
So, I don't know if you're familiar with Mike Hahn. He's a Detroit artist. This is what that's speaking. I feel like this is saying that. You've got to look him up.
It says go blue fire Jim Harbaugh. That's what it says.
Okay, it actually does.
You see it now?
That's wow. All right, see, you can even just use words, and I actually like that you brought that up. You can just use words, something simple, a nice secret message. So yeah, so if anyone else has their doodle up, definitely share that with us. And once we're done with the workshop, before we sign off, we'd like to take a picture with everyone in their doodle. And you can also tag us on Instagram when you're finished with yours.
Thanks, Ron. I wish I had known about these techniques last week. I think I really would have impressed my client. My lawyering skills and my drawing skills. And with that, I want to introduce the iconic artist for today's event. And for those of you who don't know who she is, it's Emily Dickinson. She's regarded as one of the best American poets in history. And the reason we chose Emily Dickinson for this event is because had she been alive today, she would have been diagnosed with social anxiety disorder. So Emily Dickinson had she was well off, not extremely wealthy, but well off. And as she was growing up, she really excelled in literacy and writing and reading. However, at some point as she got older, she became very reclusive. Those who knew her and historically have described her as almost having agoraphobia, which means you have an irrational fear of being in public places. And that got worse and worse as she got older. At times, she would spend days in her room and never leave her room. However, throughout her experience of being so reclusive, the more she became that way, the stronger of a writer she became. You can see her poems improve the more reclusive she became. Her love of books really took a hold of her. And that's how she was able to use art to work through what she was feeling in a way that didn't overwhelm her. Sadly, Emily Dickinson only published 8 pieces during her life and only really became famous when she died. This was during the 1800s, where it was extremely difficult too for women to publish pieces of work. But that's why we want to stress to everyone on this event and to anyone that you know, always support living artists. We don't want fame to come as someone's passed away turning in their grave. We want to recognize their talents now. So Emily Dickinson, just a very talented woman who unfortunately felt social anxiety, but had the art to help her work through that and ultimately become the famous American poet that she is today.
Thank you, Nadine. I didn't know much about Emily Dickinson's personal life, but I know that there is a show, I believe it's on Prime, and it's called Dickinson. And I did watch a couple of those episodes. So I'm curious to ask all of you, if you have seen the show, do you feel that they portrayed her agoraphobia and social anxiety, or do you feel that wasn't really addressed in the series? And you can go ahead and speak out or put it in the chat.
So yesterday I watched the first episode, and Dickinson is played by Haley Steinfeld.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it was true to character at all. In my studies of Emily Dickinson, even in high school and in college, she was a recluse but extremely intelligent. The Emily Dickinson I saw last night was very just she knew what she wanted. She got what she wanted, a very strong female personality. And it was very different from what I had read about her. I don't know if anyone else caught that. I'd love to see what you guys thought.
And Alex says the show is on Apple TV. Yeah, thank you for that. So Chloe says, I haven't seen the show, but I'm interested to hear everyone's thoughts. Yeah, so I can agree with you, Nadine. I haven't seen all of it, but what I did see, she was very confident, seemed a lot more outgoing. I know there was even a party scene that she just seemed very comfortable in. So when you were telling us about this Emily Dickinson, it just contradicted in my head what I've seen in the show. But we know that that's Hollywood and they want to keep things interesting. But I just thought it was a very interesting portrayal, compared to what you're telling us now.
Right. And Emily Dickinson had almost an obsession with death. And in the show, you see a visual of death.
Mm-hmm.
It's played by Wiz Khalifa, which I appreciated the contemporary music and actors and actresses, but it was just really different from what I had read. So if anyone else has thoughts, let us know. And with that, I will pass it to Rowan.
Thank you. So speaking of social health and creative outlets, our very own resident therapist, Marina, is going to share about a contemporary social art event. I believe it's called Paint and Pour, which some of us might be familiar with. That may be one option for her company's outing. And Marina, like I said, is the ArtSpread's resident therapist and clinical director of Villages of California. So Marina, we'd love to hear why you've chosen this as a potential option.
Yes, thank you. So I think what we're seeing, part of my job as the clinical director for Villages is I oversee about 25 therapists, and they're all at different school sites. So they don't get a lot of interaction with each other on the daily. They're surrounded by other people on their school sites, but they don't have that same ability to establish that colleague to colleague rapport. So when I was thinking about a team building activity, I really wanted to do something that was going to give them an activity, give them something to do, because I think we've all been to those mixers or networking events where you just like stand around and it's really awkward and really uncomfortable and no one really knows what to do. So I like the idea of there really being a purpose. And like we were talking about, having something to do with your hands. I've noticed in my work with clients as well that if they have a hard time with maintaining eye contact or just engaging in typical everyday conversations, if they can doodle or if they can do something with their hands and there's a tactile experience, then it's easier for them to kind of come out of their shell, so to speak. So I thought the Paint and Pour would be really nice to do that. And then obviously we're all therapists. And so the work that they're doing in this school is pretty heavy. So I know that utilizing art as an outlet for creativity is a really solid form of self-care. And it's one that we often don't think of. I mean, I've been like doodling as we've been talking and I already feel calmer. So I wanted to also use this as an opportunity to expose or re-expose all of the clinicians that art, and you don't have to be good at it to enjoy it and to experience the benefits. So that was my intention, is just to create a really positive team building opportunity. And everyone's gonna have like the group that has like the phenomenal Picasso and then the one who's like struggling to do stick figures. And I think that dichotomy is really entertaining and it breaks the ice in a natural way. So that was my rationale for the event there.
That is so well said. And I think it's a great point that you're saying you want to bring in creativity and art for people who may not be able to do that as much or in their profession, and just break them out of that shell. So thank you for that. That was really great.
Of course.
And next up, Marina is actually going to introduce one of her fellow therapists.
Yeah, so Chloe is actually working with me in my private practice. She is an APCC and is soon to be AMFT. Chloe just graduated from Pepperdine. I know, it's so exciting. We're almost there. She just graduated from Pepperdine. She specializes in working with kids and families. She's very strength focused and really seeks to provide every person that comes into her office with tools and tips. And so I'm sure that she'll do a fabulous job working and chatting with all of you today.
Yes, thank you, Marina. Perfect introduction. Nice to meet everyone. This has been a great event. I'm also loving the doodling as we go. It is very impactful already. So happy to be here. And I think I'll start maybe just by going over kind of what social anxiety is, getting more into the definition of it, making sure we're all kind of coming from the same understanding of what it is we're actually talking about. And then if it works, we can get into some questions from there, unless anyone has questions right off the bat before I get into my spiel.
Yeah, and if so, feel free to put them in the chat as you think of them as well.
Yes. All right, well, I'll just jump in kind of talking about social anxiety, more from a clinical perspective and like what it is that we're talking about when we use that term. It's thrown around a lot, but when we are talking about social anxiety, oftentimes we're talking about any type of fear and worry that can come up when we're putting ourselves in certain situations where we feel that we're possibly going to be scrutinized, be judged, by other people. So this can be as simple as going to get a cup of coffee. It can be bigger, like giving a performance, giving a talk like this. There's a wide variety of scenarios that can fall underneath this, but oftentimes it's kind of that underlying fear of judgment or scrutiny that ties into the social anxiety. And with that, that fear and anxiety oftentimes leads to avoidance. So we talk about either avoiding these situations where we're making ourselves vulnerable altogether. So we're not attending events, we're not leaving our house to go get that cup of coffee. But it can also mean that we're doing these things, but we're having significant distress while we're doing them. So we go to the party, we give the talk, but while we're doing it, internally, there's kind of a storm that's happening, whether it's visible or invisible to everyone else. There's a lot of internal distress that's happening during that time. So that's kind of a broad definition of what social anxiety is traditionally understood to be. But what can also be interesting is to understand now as we emerge from COVID, what does it mean if we as kind of a collective, a group are all experiencing social anxiety? I think we've all seen a lot of articles, a lot of research that has come out that talks about, the increase of anxiety across the nation, across the globe. And what does that mean for us? And I think it's an important question to ask. We oftentimes focus on the negative side of that. But something else that I think is important to do is to reframe and say, we can now normalize discussing social anxiety. We can normalize that it's something a lot of us are going through. And now we can kind of work together to give the community resources, or even just to build a community where we're able to talk about it and kind of work through it, again, as that collective, as that group. So in some ways, it's kind of creating a new opportunity to address what has been around for many people for quite some time. So that's been interesting to see as well. I think I saw a question in the chat.
Yes.
Now it went away.
That says, now that we know what social anxiety is, how is art used to express anxiety? What are some actionable steps we can take to strengthen our social health?
Yeah, so there are definitely, concrete steps that we can take when we're talking about art, both alleviating social anxiety, but also helping us strengthen our social skills. It can be two sides of the same coin. So on the first end of that, alleviating social anxiety, art and even just artistic expression can be a great way that we're able to visualize, to identify, to express, what the social anxiety looks like for us. And by doing that, we're ultimately able to decrease our avoidance of it. And we know that avoidance plays a huge role in anxiety overall. It's kind of what fuels that fire. So when we're able to use art to either draw, paint, create some visual depiction of what this social anxiety looks like for us, it's decreasing that avoidance. And of course, something that Marina already touched on, when we're doodling, we're using art, it's also putting us just more in a calm, positive headspace, where we're then going to be able to better manage our symptoms, better manage the impairments that come from the social anxiety. So that's one side of it. The other side of using art is how it can help us strengthen the social skills that are also going to alleviate all those impairments that we think of. So on one hand, it's kind of promoting our ability to see multiple interpretations of the same situation. And that's a skill that's really important when we're dealing with social anxiety. So when we're, let's say, looking at art, we can all look at the same piece and come up with multiple interpretations of what it is we're looking at. In the same way, we want to use that skill when we're approaching a new social situation. So yes, I can see this as something that's really scary. I'm possibly going to be judged. It's something I don't want to do. But could this also be a situation that it's exciting? I'm potentially going to connect with someone new. Can I use that skill that I use in art to interpret a piece of art and interpret situations in different ways too? So it's shifting the mindset. And that's a really important skill. It's a hard one to develop, but the more we use it, the more likely it is we're going to see the benefits of kind of that dual thinking. I'm seeing some other questions come in here. I don't know if we want to pick one.
Yeah, you go ahead and you can choose which one you'd like to address.
I can see them coming through. Let's see. How do you know when social anxiety has become harmful to daily functioning? A really good question, because I think a lot of us can have social anxiety, but we can function well. It's not impairing us. But one of the easiest ways to know that maybe it's time that we seek help, we seek additional resources, is if we're seeing impairments kind of in our day-to-day life. So, for example, am I losing friendships that I used to have because I can no longer be that friend to show up when a friend needs me? Can I make friendships? Can I maintain them? Are my grades suffering if we're students? Am I dealing with so much anxiety that I can't raise my hand in class to ask a question to help me gain the clarity I need? Now my grades are falling. Maybe I'm not even attending class anymore. It's really those areas where you'd be seeing significant impairments that will let you know maybe it's time to seek the additional help, the additional resources, rather than social anxiety just being something that I deal with on a small level, but it's manageable.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the first step of receiving those extra sources or extra helps could be?
I think awareness is a huge part of it. Being aware that if I notice grades are falling, understanding that maybe this is connected to the anxiety I feel. I think having events like this and what we talked about earlier, the collective nature of social anxiety, the more we talk about it, the more it's part of kind of the public discourse, the easier it is to be aware of when it's impacting your life. So awareness is huge. And then also accessibility. So finding resources that are within your means, whether that means individual therapy, joining a group like this where we're talking about it. There's a wide range of resources that are available, but accessibility is kind of the second piece of that equation, I think.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I really like that you also mentioned viewing art and not just creating art. So maybe someone isn't connecting when they're creating, but you can view art and find your own interpretation of that, like you said, and use that scenario of, okay, am I excited or am I scared? And which one am I feeling more? Which one can I focus on more?
Absolutely. And it can be both, but it's kind of that addition of, yes, I'm scared, but I'm also excited. That can be a first step too. And, shifting the mindset and the narrative you're telling yourself.
Mm-hmm. And there's a question here. Do you have any tips as we are about to walk into a stressful anxiety-inducing situation that can help us remain calm?
Absolutely. I mean, if we're talking about art, what we're doing right now, doodling, giving your mind an outlet, a channel to release some of that anxiety, I think it's a fantastic outlet. Oftentimes we'll talk about breathing exercises and general relaxation strategies. Those are fantastic, but considering we're here doodling, I think we can all see the benefits that it brings to have that channel. But of course, more traditional breathing exercises too. A simple one, box breathing, is great. It's an inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Breathing in that box pattern, if that's one that people are interested in using, can be really beneficial too. So both of those are great options.
And does anyone else have any questions or comments for Chloe while we have her here? And Chloe, thank you so much. We usually have a blog post for our event recap, so we'd love to have any resources you'd like to share with that. But we do have a question from Nathan. He says, how could we structure home and school environments to better address the presence of social anxiety?
I think it's a great question. Maybe to talk about school environments first. I think teachers oftentimes are with kids for most of their day. And so finding ways to incorporate, different classroom elements can be helpful. So maybe that means allowing participation through various means. So not just raising your hand to speak, but maybe through written responses, visual responses. That can be a great way to include students who maybe aren't comfortable speaking, include them in the conversation, and get them participating to give them that confidence boost they need to continue that pattern, down the line. I think in the home environment, if you're a parent, if you're a caregiver, there's a lot that you can do as well. But initially comes to mind is practicing, basic social skills, modeling how you can use relaxation techniques. That's all great. I think another great tool is to kind of model what it looks like to work through social anxiety. So if you yourself have a presentation at work, you're nervous about it as you're eating breakfast, talking through that, saying, I have this presentation today. I'm feeling nervous. Here's what I'm going to do. And you show your child that, you show your teen, whoever it is. And then when you come home, You also verbally talk to either how it worked, how it didn't, and now how you feel after having completed, whatever event performance it was that you had the anxiety for. That kind of modeling is really impactful as well.
Wow, that's so valuable. And I think what you said is very relatable for a lot of people and practical, especially with being at school and having to raise your hand or being called on. That's like, I don't know about you guys. I feel like you all agree. You're shaking your heads. Like that was like so nerve wracking. So I really appreciate the shift of, okay, maybe we don't call you out, but there's other ways that we can get you involved. And that's kind of what we try to do here as well. Like if you're uncomfortable speaking out or putting in the chat, there's a couple of other ways we can have participation that isn't making you feel overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
And then we have another question. Have you seen anxiety in clients increase after the pandemic?
Absolutely. Both just anecdotally, sitting in the session room, and also the data that's come out has shown that anxiety has absolutely increased over the course of and kind of after the pandemic. And again, you see it at varying levels. Some people can function with it. They can cope. Others, it's, quite debilitating. And so these are really important discussions to be having. Again, normalizing this type of discourse, talking about it, making people aware is such an important first step, but we've definitely seen, an increase in it, in clinical work. So it is top of mind for us, always, and trying to catch it as early as we can is really important as well.
And I think just knowing that people like you and Marina and other therapists are having to manage all of this. I think, Marina, what you're doing with having a creative outing for your team is so valuable. Like the more I'm listening to what you're having to work through and how you help other people, it's, I think, a really great way to allow yourselves to have that expression and downtime together, especially since it's so relatable for you. So yeah, it's connecting now even more after Chloe speaking, and I was like, wow, that's a lot on therapists as well. And sometimes we might take that for granted. So thank you both for all that you do for us. Mm-hmm. And if anyone has any more questions for Chloe, now is the time. This is great information. So be sure to put it in the chat. And yeah, with that, I'll let Nadine take it. And Chloe,
Thanks.
If you have any other remarks, just let us know as well.
Yeah, feel free, anyone at any time. We can jump back and forth. It's no problem. I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker. It's Nathan. He is a college student at California Polytechnic University. He graduated high school with a 4.115 GPA. He did 4 years of United States Marine Corps Junior ROTC courses at his high school. And he went through the pandemic in a high school and is now a college student. So from his perspective, it'll be really nice to know what were the differences, what's changed pre and post, and socially, how have people reacted after coming back to school with the hiatus we had from the pandemic. So with that, Nathan, if you could show yourself and unmute yourself and let us know.
Hey, so I'm Nathan, like Nadine said, but I guess one of the biggest points I want to touch on is I'll do a comparison of before versus after the pandemic, and I'll also talk about how it affected like the society of the school as a whole and how it affected me individually. So I guess before the pandemic, one of the things to note was how close everyone was to each other. And because of that, and because of that camaraderie, there was very little social anxiety present. Well, there was a lot, but comparatively to post-pandemic, there was not much. But with the pandemic coming in, a lot of people experienced more social anxiety, but they also they experienced more excitement as well. So it was kind of like a yin-yang situation in the sense that although everyone was more nervous to be around each other because it's been so long, there's also like a spark of excitement because of the lack of socializing during the pandemic. One of the things I wanted to touch on too was, well, actually, I'll go on that after. But in terms of the individual sense, I guess for me, one of the things that was very interesting was coming back from the pandemic. Initially, I didn't really have any social anxiety. It was more excitement. But then as that excitement settled, I guess then the long-term effects of the pandemic started to show in terms of social anxiety. I wasn't as like proactive in my classes. I used to be excited to like answer questions and stuff. I would raise my hand and stuff, and I wasn't like that anymore. And I was able to recognize it too. It was like an interesting thing. Like I was more nervous to be proactive in my classes. I was nervous to present stuff in my classes and whatnot. But yeah, one of the things I wanted to touch on that I thought was interesting was coming back from school. Our high school had a huge issue with fights, and like we had probably like 30 fights in like a couple months. So it was a big problem. And one of the things that I personally would tie that to would be the social anxiety. It was like people forgot how to socialize, and also people were tied to a screen for several years. So I feel like coming back, people still kept their online digital personality, which usually has no repercussions. So you could be as good or bad of a person as you want and not have a problem with it. But people brought that into the real world, and there were consequences for it.
Yeah, and if I could jump in, Nathan. So the deposition I was talking about at the beginning, that was actually via Zoom, so the attorney wasn't even in the room. And I felt like you're right. He can be way more aggressive towards me and not have to look me in the eye and say it. As in person, he would probably never do that.
And that's super interesting, Nathan. When you're noticing this stuff, do you feel that the school addressed these issues, like the social anxiety, or do they provide resources for their students from your perspective?
No, I wouldn't say the school addressed social anxiety. I mean, so the school would host a lot of events to help get people together, but in terms of social anxiety itself, no, they didn't have anything to address it at all.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that goes back to what Chloe said about awareness and accessibility. And a student like you, you're focused, you're intelligent, you don't even know if there are resources. So that's a huge role too in the school, letting you know that there is access to that, because I imagine that there should be. So that was just a really interesting thing to hear you say, and kind of unfortunate as well. So I think that some of the tips that Chloe was giving us, I hope that we can apply those, whether you are a teacher or a parent. Maybe that's something that you can offer to a school. So my next question for you is, what did help alleviate social anxiety for students? Like what kind of things helped with that?
I guess one example would be a lot of people on sports teams had less social anxiety, and I would accredit that to a couple different reasons. One of the reasons being there were still some sports tournaments and whatnot going on through the pandemic, so it allowed some more social interaction. And number two, like people on sports teams had a strong camaraderie, so everyone was super close to each other. Like for instance, I was on the wrestling team, and I knew everyone there like perfectly. Like we've been together for so many years, like hours a day, 5 days a week. So I've been comfortable around them. So I guess every day after school, going to see them, during practice made me more comfortable, and I'm sure it made other students more comfortable for sports teams. But there are also other things. For some students, it was music, whether it's listening to music or whether it's expressing yourself through producing music or playing music. For others, it's art, of course. A lot of people would doodle and draw. Teachers would get mad, but yeah. And for some people, it was like even more like interesting stuff, like some people were like really into engineering and would design like robots every day, you know, in robotics class. But
Was that you, Nathan?
a
When you
little
say
bit, a
some
little bit.
people?
Some people. Yeah, I think that's so important. Like we said, like using your hands really helps with that. And a lot of the examples you mentioned, people are using parts of their body. Alex says, I can relate to sports helping with social anxiety. That definitely helped me. Has anyone here been on a sports team, clubs, things like that, that really helped you feel a sense of teamwork and kind of like your safe zone in a bigger school? Definitely put that in the chat if you'd like. What else, Nathan? Do you have any other thoughts on what your peers would do or what the school could offer?
I guess what some of my peers would do, a lot of them created their own, like as you mentioned, clubs and stuff. I know some people who create their own clubs and whatnot, which I guess was one thing the school offered that was good was the ability to create your own clubs, because people would create something where they had a sense of like a shared passion or something. So there were art clubs, there were like anime clubs, there were, you know, uh, any clubs for virtually anything you could think of. There was a lettuce club. People like lettuce, yeah. But it was interesting because there are a lot of people to like people's common interests and shared interests to at least get together, and I think that alleviated a lot of social anxiety. But in terms of what the school could do, I think
Maybe even offering resources like access to people like Chloe and Marina, because Chloe, it's you work at a school, is that correct?
I don't work at a school, but I do work with school age kids and adolescents.
Yeah, so just having more of that connection to people like Chloe where they can say, okay, maybe we can't help you right here, but we have someone who can. But I think, again, like she said, it starts with being aware, and sometimes it can be really hard for educators to be aware of all this just because there are so many students and everyone expresses themselves in different ways. And yes, so Chloe, if you'd like, you can share your contact information here just so that we do have access. And Nathan, so now that we've kind of learned more about your high school experience post, pre and post pandemic, what do you feel it was like for you in college? And how can we, for people who have social anxiety, how can they go into a college experience and not feel as overwhelmed?
well, I think one of the things that's very interesting is the fact that you know, I'm a freshman in college now, so right out of the pandemic, I'm coming in as a freshman. So for me, since everyone's starting on a clean slate, everyone's very kind, friendly, looking to make friends and stuff. And depending on the person, it could be better for their social anxiety, but it could also be overwhelming. So I guess it depends, but there's different clubs and stuff you could do on campus, and different events of different sizes. So for instance, like if you want to hang out on a Friday night, you know, there's going to be a lot of people, and I'm sure that could be overwhelming for some people. But if they want to start getting in the like in the groove of things in college and not be overwhelmed, you know, they could do stuff on a Wednesday night. There won't be as many people doing stuff on a weekday. Will allow them to still have some social connection, but there's not going to be 100 people. You know, there'll be like maybe 5 or something, and they can still develop some friendships and enjoy some of the experiences that you normally would.
Yeah, so that's important to not avoid, but find other ways that you could still participate that are maybe less stimulating or crowded.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, so for example, some of the folks we have here, Sheena and I met through an organization in law school. Jonathan Turner and I met through just in the library. So I mean, there's ways to definitely adjust how you want to be involved socially. So I think that's a great idea. And then do you have one or two questions for you, Nathan, actually? In choosing your college coming out of the pandemic, was the size of the campus something that you considered?
I mean, Honestly, for me, choosing college was very. Uh, it was determinate based off of how good their engineering programs were. So I looked at it pretty objectively in terms of that. I figured whether social life, all that that can come. Like I'll figure something out once I get into the college. But I wanted primarily a good engineering program. So for me, Cal Poly, they've got a pretty good engineering program. So that's why I chose that. But the campus is relatively small. So what makes that nice is the fact that everyone is close. I always stumble upon people that I meet versus, going to a huge campus where, you're probably going to meet like a new person every second, you won't see the same person twice ever. But Cal Poly is not like that. It's because it's small, we're all close. And I guess that makes it easier and there's less social anxiety there.
So, question from Rita and Chloe based off of that. Do you find that if you're going to a social setting where you recognize the people or you're more familiar with them, does that help most people in that situation versus when they're going into a new setting every time?
I think, yeah, if you're going into a social setting where you're familiar with the people, it definitely helps with social anxiety because then you start to understand the people around you and how they are, and then you realize they're human too. Mm-hmm. Versus if you're going into a new setting all the time, like in a big college campus, you can never get used to other people. You can never get familiar with them. You can never get close to them, and then it doesn't help social anxiety. It probably worsens it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. We also have a question in the chat by Alex. She says, do you think that the pandemic changed or affected students' college choices?
I would say it did. I don't know how much it would have affected it in terms of social anxiety, but I do know people chose colleges based off of whether it was Zoom or in person. Obviously, one of the reasons being in terms of how good your what's it called? Your
remote.
Yeah, how good the remote learning is. But one of the other reasons is I'm sure people wanted to get ready to socialize more, and get back into it. And so 100% some people probably chose colleges that were more social and getting back into it post-pandemic, while other people who had experienced more social anxiety, I'm sure, picked colleges that were more remote and more Zoom, where you could just, have your camera off and do the work on your own time. And I'm sure it's different for everybody, but I'm sure, yeah, in the end, everyone made decisions based off of what they were looking for in their college experience. And then there was another question by Chloe. Nathan, curious if you saw social media usage impact peers' social anxiety both during and after the pandemic, either alleviate or worsen. I would say during the pandemic, it definitely alleviated a lot of social anxiety because obviously, there's the ability to connect with each other. And then I was talking to Nadine about this the other day as well. Stuff like filming TikToks and whatnot really helps it too, because you can invite your friend over to film a TikTok and then you develop that bond, that relationship. Or you can chat with other people online. You can do all this kind of stuff. You can play video games together. In terms of after the pandemic, I would say it kind of worsened it, honestly, because people got accustomed to it and they almost didn't want to, they're so digitized that they don't want to go back into in-person, face-to-face. They don't want to make eye contact, like Nadine said about her who was
friend online.
No, you're
the lawyer.
other attorney.
Right.
Yeah, your friend. But yeah, he didn't want to make eye contact, so he can do all that stuff. So in that sense, it worsened it definitely post-pandemic, but during it helped a lot with social anxiety and it helped people get together and closer.
Wow, Nathan.
Thanks for that. So we are just about done with our event. So I want to make sure if there are any other questions, now's the time to put them in either for Chloe, for Nathan, for any one of us. And if not, then we will talk about our closing remarks.
Yeah, I think it's a really great opportunity. If you do have questions, you can also email us and we can forward them to either Nathan or Chloe. But it's really interesting hearing professional insight and also more of the personal experience as well. And it's just, yeah, all the connections we're able to make once Chloe explains things and then Nathan's actually showing us how he's living it out. It's very interesting.
And if everyone can share quickly their doodle, I'm going to take a screenshot. So just hold it up for 2 seconds. Oops. Smile. Great. Thanks,
I
guys.
love
Everyone's
it.
sweet. Wow, Sheena.
I love it. And also, you can tag us on Instagram. You can send us a picture of your template so that we can share it with everyone else as well. And again, go ahead, Nadine.
Sorry, Rowan, I didn't mean to cut you off. So we just want to make sure everyone stays in touch. So this is our last virtual event of the year. We will be back in February of 2023. So definitely, Sheena, you have a fan club there, so I love yours. So definitely keep in touch on social media. So like Roman was saying, tag us if you've done a doodle, just take a picture and tag the art spread. If you're wearing your merch from the art spread, send us your pics and we'll put it in our newsletter. We'd love to get that out as well. And then November 12th is the upcoming in-person exhibition where all of our artists' work will be featured in the exhibition. We're really excited. It's a beautiful venue in Newport Beach. So if you're local, definitely hang out with us. It's free, and there will be complimentary refreshments. And until then, I'll hand it to Rowan.
Yeah, so thank you again, everyone. As always, follow us on Instagram so we can stay in touch until February. And for those who will be in California, we can't wait to see you in November. And yeah, anytime you have any questions or anything, be sure to reach out. I'll put our email address in the chat. It's hello@theartspread.org.
Thank you to our guest speakers we love today. Thank you all again for attending.
We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.